We pick up the story right where we left it, with just a short drive across to the other side of the lake, and we find ourselves in Portugal. Our campsite stopover is only the third campsite of the trip and a good excuse to put all our camping gear to use. We only had a short time in Portugal and decided to build a route around some of the mountain bike centres that exist in the north and the centre of the country. These would also take us into the heart of many natural beauty spots where we hope to see the wild side of Portugal. Our first ride was a circular tour of a hilltop monastery which had a recent forest fire wiping out the entire hillside. There was nothing technical on the ride, although we did pick up a trail dog which was good fun to chase. He seemed to know where he was going better than our GPS did.
Show us the way. Really not. It's alright, we're just gonna pass you.
The ride would also take us through small villages surrounded by vineyards. The rich smell of grapes was everywhere.
A short drive to Aroca Geopark gave us the opportunity to walk along the Paiva River. It was a unique and beautiful walk on a boardwalk all along an 8-kilometre stretch of the steep riverbank. At the far end was the largest suspension footbridge in the world. Unfortunately, we couldn't get on the bridge as it was fully booked, later realising it was due to a national holiday in Portugal. The start point of our next ride turned out to be at a sanctuary on top of a hill. It was one of the most beautiful and peaceful places we'd ever been to. Even Marmot had a moment with his maker. The ride we did followed a hiking route, so you never know what you're going to get. Luckily it was all rideable. First taking us steeply up to a small hilltop monastery, then with a fun descent down the nose of the hill into some remote villages. Our next stopping point was at Serra da Freita, a beautiful and rocky natural park and also home to Portugal's largest waterfall. One of the things we loved about Portugal is its culture of outdoor living, including wild swimming, which is actively encouraged in many places with designated river beaches and rock pools. We simply had to immerse ourselves in it.
A short distance away from our Aroca Geopark, we find ourselves in São Pedro, where we knock out the longest ride of the trip so far. It turned out to be quite a fruitful ride, as along the trail we had access to plenty of supplies such as grapes and figs, sometimes eating them straight from the tree. It was also interesting to see such things as walnuts and quince growing in the wild. The final descent turned out to be a cracker, challenging manicured features, even taking us through a water drainage tunnel, which we had our doubts about. This was definitely a first.
Portugal's highest mountain range is aptly named the Serra da Estrela, or the Mountain Range of Stars. It is also the country's largest national park. Having arrived in the dark and the rain, it was a nice surprise to wake up to the blue sky in the very hilly town of Manteigas. The park has a number of waymarked mountain bike routes which we would use to explore the area. Very sadly, in the summer's heatwave, just a month before we arrived, the park was ravaged by a huge wildfire. The fire destroyed over 28,000 hectares of the protected area. This had a devastating impact on the park's flora and fauna and the livelihoods of the people. The area is famous for its cheese, and we are only too happy to spend money in the town to sample it. The damage caused by the fire gave the park a raw beauty. Although it was so sad to think of the loss of wildlife, there was hope. Small plants and flowers had already begun to sprout from the ashen soil.
We covered about 70 kilometres and 2,000 metres of climbing around Manteigas, which was mostly burnt out from the forest fires. The furthest point of the ride gave us views looking across the valley towards the highest point in Portugal, Torre, at 2,000 metres. It was a bit of an odd place, as you could drive right to the summit and park up overnight below the old radar station. The summit gave us incredible sunset and sunrise views, whichever direction you looked in. This was becoming the norm for Portugal. From the summit we had an excellent walk descending over craggy terrain to a mountain lake. I can't say we've had many walks where we've started with the descent and finished with the climb back to the summit.
From Portugal's highest point, the only way was down. We headed west near a town called Penacova and camped at a dedicated mountain bike hub next to a river beach, yet another excuse for a dip. The next day, a foggy but atmospheric ride took us past ancient windmills, monuments and monasteries, as well as finishing on some nice purpose-built trail. A short drive took us to our final stop in Portugal in the Serra da Loazan, which has one of Portugal's only bike parks. Sadly, there was no uplift and the routes were poorly signed. We found ourselves on a World Cup level course with crazy 20-foot gap jumps, definitely for pros only. Due to Brexit, we are only allowed 90 days in Europe and our time was nearly up, so we made a beeline straight down to Algeciras port to catch a ferry to Morocco. Getting to Morocco would be a big deal, as it would extend our trip by at least another 3 months and hopefully also allow us a further 3 months in Europe when we returned. Portugal was such a beautiful and wild country, we would have liked to have had more time there, we would just have to come back.
bye.